Thank you for being here, Radha. I'm going to dive into our conversation. Folks are still streaming in. I can see some names on the list here that I recognize. But as I mentioned, these are folks who have been a part of our academies in the past. So I'm just looking down the list and I see folks who have been a part of a bunch of our different academies over the years: Critics Academy,
Mm-hmm.
Artists Academy, and Industry Academy. So many folks who are in the room, in the virtual space here with us right now, and folks who will we will share this with from our academies as well, who couldn't be here with us today. And we'll hear it from the questions and comments that we get from folks shortly. But I had a very strong sense after I saw this movie back in January at Sundance that it would really resonate with members of the alumni of our academies. So thank you for taking the time to sit with us today. And I know it's a big day for you. The film is up on Netflix as we speak.
Right now. I think at 2 or 3 in the morning is when it went up on the platform, at least on the East Coast. And I have some very, very awesome, diligent friends who were like, no, we're going to wait until we can, once it's on, we're on. So very grateful that we've come here. We've gotten to this moment.
Congratulations. I saw the film a couple times, back at Sundance and over the summer, but I watched it again this morning on the platform itself. So it actually works on the platform, and I wanted to have it fresh in my mind. So
okay, well, that's good to hear. And it's good to hear. It's affirming to hear that from a cinephile, because you don't shoot a film on black and white 35 millimeter film for it to end up on a tablet necessarily, you know what I mean? Or iPhone. So when I first heard about the streaming opportunity, it was something Lena had been talking about before we even went into production. She was like, wouldn't it be great if it would be on Netflix? And I was like, would it be great? I want people to see this in an art house cinema, and look how things turned out. It's nice to hear that it still works on the streaming platform. But hoping there's an opportunity in the future to show the 35 millimeter print in New York at one of these art house cinemas.
Let's make a date for that. Can we have a rain check on that? And
Yes, please. I would love that.
Once we can be in a movie theater, I think it would be great to see this film on a film print at Lincoln Center.
And right. And we have a limited release right now. And people are going to theaters, and there'll be one of maybe 5 people, if that many, in a theater. So they get to have that experience. But it's just something about being in a room with people experiencing a film like this together. That, hopefully we'll have that one more time, because it is a different experience. But I do commend New York Film Festival, other festivals, other outlets, and how they've, worked around this particular crisis, and getting content to an audience. Again, like I said, I know a lot of people who signed up for New York Film Festival's virtual screenings, and it's been a thrill, because it means a larger audience for some of these films.
It does, and I think that that audience is something we can't take for granted. And we'll talk about audience today. For the next half hour or so, we'll talk about audience, but I also want to talk about filmmaking. So I want to get to both. And I want to acknowledge and thank our friends at Netflix. And we'll talk about Netflix too. Thank our friends at Netflix for their support of the New York Film Festival and this talk today, and for making this happen today. So thank you. Well, let's talk. Actually, you mentioned shooting it on 35 and having a vision for what this film would look like and how it would engage an audience in a movie theater. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that decision first, and we'll go into how you sort of got to the idea and how you got to this story and how it connects to your own story and your own life. But let's just talk about theatrical and 35 millimeter and the visual side of what you were aiming for, and how you sort of came to those decisions when you were putting this together.
Well, it's so funny. Like, some of these decisions, I don't know. When something feels like it's a part of your life, there isn't a decision to be made. It's just a thing that you breathe. I was raised by a cinephile, a Black woman who loved. My mom, Carol Blank,
Okay.
she loved black and white film, so it's not as foreign to me as it might be to someone else. Lost Weekend, Repulsion, Night of the Hunter, The Apartment, New York Stories, you name it. I mean, like, I was really fed black and white films. So I just always thought, wow, it would be interesting to shoot a film in black and white. And of course, you know, people like Spike and Shmuddy Schmalin and other filmmakers have done it before. And so I think a part of me was like, I want to make something that feels like a classic film, something that feels nostalgic. And so I thought about a lot of the filmmakers who influenced me, from Sidney Lumet to Hal Ashby, Kathleen Collins, and Spike, Robert Townsend. They didn't have another format to fall back on. So I just kind of thought about that. And also I kind of craved what I felt would be an urgency around shooting on film. You know, I think digital filmmaking, you know, I think people know that they can do another take, you know what I mean? And it might inform how they arrive at a performance or just on set, you know, whereas this, you felt the urgency. But yeah, it felt natural to me to shoot on 35 millimeter film, even though I'd never done it before. And it was daunting as, like, it was just as daunting and arduous. Everybody said it was. Didn't change my desire to shoot in that film, on that format, and also add to the canon of films that had been shot in New York before. But this time, just like with people who look like me at the center, you know, I found myself, you know, wanting to present hip hop culture in what felt like a more sophisticated, more vulnerable, like a cool tone. And then myself, my DP Eric Bronco, who shot Clemency, Chinonye Chukwu's amazing film. He's a native New Yorker. And so he had from the Bronx, and he had this investment, like, Radha, we're going to get you what you need. We're going to do 3 camera tests, you know? And I found myself looking back at the photography of Roy DeCarava to just kind of keep me focused on why black and white. It's just the way people of color, Black people in particular, brown skin tone, show up, you know, on black and white. His book, his life's work really speaks to just the sumptuousness of Black skin tone in those shades of gray. So I just wanted to do something that incorporated all of these different ideas and kind of inspiration, so to speak.
It's interesting that you mentioned the word nostalgic a minute ago, because I think that's a great word to use. I also thought about timelessness.
Thank you.
And I wonder, it's hard to think about that probably when you're in the moment and you're making a plan for your movie. You can aspire to a lot, but I don't know, when I'm seeing the movie for a third time today, there is a timeless quality to it. Because even though it's presented and it takes place in a moment, what it's exploring, and not just the world, but the ideas and the characters and the environment and the struggles feel timeless in a certain way.
Means
so I
a
was
lot
thinking about
to,
time.
yeah, it means a lot to hear that. And you know, it's funny, you're right, because you're on a set in real life where everything is in color. And no amount of going back and looking at playback is going to ensure that you're getting what you know, it was what was the playback? It was what is the system called? Now I'm forgetting the name of it. But it was like raw playback. It was not film that I'm looking at. So I was never going to see what we had until we got those dailies back. And that would be 4 days. So it was all a risk. It was all a risk. And it was less of a risk if I shot it in color, but I was being such a purist that I was like, I only want to shoot on color when we have to. And, you know, the big battle scene, it's this huge cavernous space. There was no way to light that. We didn't have the time. We didn't have the resources. And if I would just kind of let my ego get the hell out the room and say, okay, for this scene, we'll shoot in color. These nighttime scenes, interiors, we will shoot on color film. But for the most part, I was trying to be a purist. And again, I didn't know what I had until we got those first dailies back, which was 4 days later. And I remember hearing from Rob Wilson, who edited the film, the first pass of the film, and him being like, wait until you see this shit. Because we really didn't know. We really didn't know. And then here I am saying to my producing team, like, oh no, it's going to be fine. Listen, we've done tests, and I didn't know what the shit was going to look like. I really didn't know. And 4 days later, it was the affirmation that we all needed to just keep moving forward, you know?
So when you saw those first 4 days in, when you saw those dailies, you knew it was what you wanted it to be?
It was like a titanium shot up my spine. I was like,
really?
I really did stand taller. Yeah, because I think my vision of the film was still very much in theory at that point, even though we shot some great scenes. The very first scene that I shot is the scene where I am, I've got the hood on, I look like the Unabomber, and I'm approaching Archie to tell him I want to be a rapper. Right. That's the very first scene that we shot. And all the way through, I'm like, yeah, well, just trying to play the role of a confident director, just in my mind saying, oh God, I hope that this works out. No, put that, that should go there. And but when I saw it, it was, I let out a sigh of relief. And then I started thinking about my filmmaking forefathers and foremothers and was like, I wonder if this is what they went through, because it's such a risky, I wouldn't say risky, but it's not infallible. When you shoot on film, you just don't know what's going on inside those motors. So it was very affirming for us, and we just were supercharged.
I want to pick up on something you just said, and that is confidence. Something we talk about in our academies with folks who are in an early stage of their career, whether they're artists, folks, film critics, folks working in the industry, is that question of confidence and building up that confidence, building up that strength. But I'm also thinking about, creatively speaking, of course, how you balance that with vulnerability, being true to yourself and where you are in your process, and how and when to share that with your team. Was that something you were navigating? How were you navigating confidence and vulnerability in the context of this film, whether on the set, before, during, or after production?
Yeah.
Is that something
it's so
that resonates?
Funny. Yeah, it absolutely does, Eugene. It's something I talk about all the time. It's like, being a filmmaker is about being both open to ideas that are going to come from outside of you, criticisms, notes, and also being a protector and holder of your vision, like creating a balance between those two so that the voice doesn't suffer from too much outside opinion, and it doesn't suffer from too much ego to not allow what's going to make it better. I really do curate my friend groups, and I have a group of filmmaker friends: Terrence Nance, Sean Peters, Keith Joseph Atkins, who's an amazing writer. And these are people that Stella Meggie, Liesl Tommy, who also is, been a theater director for many years and is starting a transition into film directing. So we were in the same place. I really did call on those people to either sometimes just cry, to vent, to maybe release some of my frustration, so that when I got on the set, I was as clear as I possibly could be. But I don't know what I would be without that fellowship. I remember at one point when the producers learned how long it would take to get those dailies. And one of the producers was like, well, you know what? There's one very simple solution to this, Radha. Shoot everything in color and then make it black and white. And it was Terrence that I called on, Terrence Nance. And I was like, oh my God, he was like, no, you just remember what it is you wanted to do and you set out to do. Terrence told me, I hope I'm not telling on him, he was like, I don't even look at dailies.
Wow.
Now, what kind of confidence is that? He barely looks at dailies,
wow.
And so that really invigorated me to just keep moving forward and to have the confidence that, because the thing is that we all have our doubts about, especially when the product is it's still a piece of faith. It's an idea here and there is no real product yet. But I feel like it is my job, in spite of what other people think and what I think, to carry the thing through and to protect it and also not get in its way. Because I found that the film would start communicating to me. I had these intentions. Oh, I want this to happen and this to happen, this to happen. And the film would be like, nah, this is what we're going to do. it's going to be a sparse crowd, or it's going to be blah, 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 you know? And so that I felt was my job. Like my two biggest jobs was casting the right people. Shout out to Jessica Daniels, who helped me to cast this film. And also being a protector of the film, even when I had to protect the film from myself, if that makes any sense. Those are my two jobs.
I want to pick up on doubts then, because do doubts, I can relate to what you're saying. Do doubts drive you differently creatively now than they did at different stages in your career? Do you see doubt differently? Do you handle, when you feel doubt differently in your life?
I do. I feel it different. It has a different place, I should say.
Yeah.
You know, I think people are like, oh wow, you turned into this director now. I don't think that I've turned into a director. I think I've always been one. The doubts had a much bigger say in my life and career at the time. And I was trying all kinds of writing and all kinds of performance work when this is really who I was all the time. So I am more confident. And the doubt, I tried to look at fear. Fear can be a great teacher, either of like what I should be concerned about, or maybe what I'm still self-conscious about. And if I'm self-conscious about it, I then ask myself, why? Is it because you're giving an audience or critics or whatever a certain level of power? Like you're really concerned about what they think? Or is it that you think you cannot pull this off? You know? So I feel when doubts or fears come up, it's not something to get worried about. And I'm a person who deals with depression. And I know this is going to sound weird to make this kind of analogy, but I treat my depression like I do a menstrual cycle. Okay. When it's coming, I don't go, oh my God, oh no, this thing. I go, oh, I'm depressed. I acknowledge it. And when I do that, it actually lasts a lot less. And so I feel like, look at the doubt, if you can, as a teacher. Well, what can I learn from this moment, as opposed to internalizing it, and the doubt meaning that you don't know what you're doing or other people know better. It's like, what does this mean? Look at it. And I think that kind of observation and kind of acceptance that the thing exists makes it actually kind of dissipate. You know what I mean? It turns into something else.
It's a great point. I can totally relate to that too, because I wish, sometimes looking back 20 years ago in my career, you wish, or at least for me, I wish that I could have learned how to process doubts or insecurities or fears differently, because with maybe with some age or confidence or just living a life for a while, knowing how to navigate things that are a part of you or factors that impact you, knowing how to sort of take them in, like acknowledge, accept, and then deal with, as opposed to
face it.
Right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I had doubts from the fact that I'm not a trained filmmaker. I didn't go to film school. I created my own by studying Cassavetes and looking at films and looking at Phantom Thread and being like, oh my God, like this is these choices are deliberate, like created my own syllabus, but I didn't have academia to fall back on. And so there was a lot of doubts about, well, can I do this? Here's the thing about that I realized is no amount of academia or academic training can prep you for a film shoot. None. Because any and everything that could go wrong could possibly go wrong. And it's why I'm grateful for my time at Sundance. Honestly, I know people say that, but I really do mean that, because for Sundance, you pick out 4 or 5 scenes from your script, you shoot those things, and you really get to learn what your film is. But you also get to learn what kind of filmmaker you are. That's where I feel like I learned I was a filmmaker, when the adversity would pop up and I had to solve a problem. Because what's going to happen on your set, right? Permits may fall through, weather, actor may get sick or just quit. This location is no longer available, those resources. And I feel like I became a filmmaker when I started solving those problems in ways that still lifted the film and the production, so it's like, I know no matter how many books you read, even if your professors all show up on set for you, like you still have to embody the role of a director. Sundance gave me that chance. So now I could look at a scene. There's one scene in particular with me and Whitman, where he's talking to me about his feelings about my play and what's missing and all this stuff. And I'd done this scene with Neil, why am I forgetting his last name? Oh my God, I'm a terrible person. An amazing actor. I'll just say that, and I'll come back and I'll remember his name in a second. But was workshopping the scene with him. The scene was so funny. It was so funny, but it wasn't my movie. And what a gift that was to learn. People were laughing, but it wasn't the movie. Not quite. There were certain elements I borrowed, but it wasn't the movie. And I was like, how privileged I am to learn that lesson here. And then there'd be another scene, like the sequence when I go back to Brooklyn to confront D about him ghosting me. I shot it in a sequence of 3. And there was a wide shot in there. And one of my advisors was like, first of all, we were looking at it on a monitor. And my advisors was like, they're too far apart. You need to cut in. You need to cut over. You need to do all of this coverage, which sometimes feels like a bad word to me. Because, I come from theater. So I like a long shot. I like I like the, the theater stage kind of thing. But when we got to see it on the big screen, people understood what that distance was about. And they didn't get together until it was that 2 shot of them, and I felt so vindicated because I made choices to support this idea and it worked. So, again, you don't know until you're on the set doing it. And then you see the product, you see what comes out of it. And so, I don't know, I think I just want to encourage more people to like go out and do it and stop having the film in theory and in your books and looking at your master classes. All of that is great, but like, you don't know until you're on the set. You don't know.
Let me switch gears a little bit. This is great feedback, advice, guidance. Some of the aspects of you that we're talking about, whether that be confidence or vulnerability or insecurity, fear, creativity. These are all things many of these are topics that are explored in the film itself, because there's the Radha Blank that I'm talking with right now and we're listening to, and then there's the Radha Blank in the film. So help us from a creative perspective. You have a lot of young, or I shouldn't say young, emerging or certainly successful as well in their own right, artists listening and thinking about what you're talking about, who've just watched your film this morning. Help us understand the creative choices you made in translating aspects of Radha Blank, the person, to Radha Blank, the character, and maybe the challenges, the opportunities, some of the things you were thinking about as you made that adaptation, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of people sending up their lives. I watched movies like Tiny Furniture, and this isn't sending up his own life, but sending up what is supposed to be real life. I watched the work of Christopher Guest. I'm obsessed with documentaries, and This Is Spinal Tap is like my favorite movie of all time, like really. And so, in that, that there are probably big chunks, like looking at Tiny Furniture, there are big chunks of the person's real life present. She's playing a version of herself. Her mother isn't it, sister isn't it. They're shooting in her mom's apartment. All of that stuff is great because the audience is now like, oh wait, this kind of feels like a documentary, what's real, what's not. It's a narrative. And, it's a film between 90 minutes and 2 hours. And so it has to go like that, and it has to end. And so I found myself chipping away at information that didn't serve that. Like at one point I was like, okay, I've done this, I've done that. What do I need to happen in this moment to catalyze the protagonist? So I invented things like the under 30 award. I didn't win that, but I know that, if a film that's commenting on age, we have to give her something that represents, this glorification of youth, a youth that is fading, right? So I gave her that. The proof, the jury's not out yet on whether or not I actually choked a theater producer. But I knew that would work you know, there needed to be, I'm really a fan of the characters plotting their way, you know, that there's a thing that this person does that changes their a choice that they made. Dog Day Afternoon. I mean, my God, you couldn't find a better film about somebody making good or bad choices. And so I was like, okay, I need to give the character something. Like, I can't choose what the thing is. And I don't know if the things in my life are dramatic enough for a film that goes like that. So I will give her this moment where she chokes this guy and the career goes choo. So she has no choice but to go in a different direction. When the hip hop thing kind of comes to her, there is this commentary I'm making about the ancestors and the presence of people who passed on. So I feel like in that moment that the inspiration came from somewhere, but she took it. Like, that's active. It wasn't like someone pushed her in front of her mic. She actively was like, yo, where my period at? You know, like, she decided in that moment to embrace this hip hop side of her. But yeah, like, that's my brother. That's my dad's music. There's that scene at the end where we're literally all, I get very emotional because we're all in the same room together. When I finally go confront my brother or go to my mom's place, though that's not my mom's place, those are her paintings on the wall. That is my dad's music. And that is my big brother in the room. So yeah, it was definitely me sitting down and going, okay, I know you feel this was a very personal moment for you, but what is good for the character? My mom passed away October 7th, 2013.
Wow.
The character's mom passes away exactly a year, maybe, before the film begins. So I had to do these things so that I could get out the way and let the character have their own separate journey.
Is that a hard balance to find?
It is a hard.
Or how do you find that? Is it about you finding that balance, or is it about, you talked about your friend network, is it about people around you helping you find that, or where?
Yes, I'll just tell you a very personal story. My brother and I were much closer before our parents passed away. I realized, like, there's this thing called triangulating that people do in relationships. And even though we kind of complain about my mom, she really was the glue. And when she passed away, we just aren't as close. And so at one point I wasn't sure about the scene with the brother. And so I had taken it out and I replaced it with a scene with Valerie Maynard, who is not only a master artist at 82, she's one of my mother's close friends. So she represents who my mom might have been if she wasn't a mother and wasn't as obscure as an artist. She also represents who I could turn into if I, dedicate myself to my art. So I put that scene in there and it's beautiful. And it visually, oh my God, the scene has me running to Baltimore, where I also live, going to Baltimore, going to Valerie for that sage advice. And we're in her beautiful brownstone with all of this artwork. It would have been eyegasms, right? I give the script to my friend who doesn't know about the scene with my brother, doesn't know, just knows that the brother is kind of calling from, whatever. And he says to me, I love that scene with Valerie, but something is missing from your film. So when is she going to confront the brother, who is kind of the avatar for my mom? And I burst into tears. So I was like, wow, that was what I always intended, but I'd taken it out because, and it was such a good decision to put that back in. And I don't know that I would have gotten it that's Keith Joseph Atkins, who is I can't even count on my one hand how many people I share my work with, but he's someone I trust implicitly, and he knew just what was missing without even knowing that thing was there before. You know what I mean? That again goes back to the fellowship thing. Like, I don't know what kind of filmmaker or storyteller I'd be if I didn't have people who believed in me, but also weren't afraid to tell me their truth. Now it's up to me to decide whether or not I'm going to use what they give. But these are people who know me, they know my work, they know my potential, and they just, what's great about this storytelling circle and what I've learned and why I think I give really great notes is I'm always giving notes based on the filmmaker's intention. Like I'm not, has nothing to do with me. I'm just trying to be, which is very symbolic of the movie, a mirror. And I'm always asking, what is it that you're intending? Oh, you want it to feel? I don't know if it does that. I don't know if it's giving me, instead of going, well, you know what I would have done? No, I don't give notes like that. And my circle doesn't give notes like that, because it's not about me in that moment. It's about me figuring out what your intention is, and then being a temperature check and saying, I don't know if you, not sure if that's what you want it to feel like. It doesn't feel like that in this moment to me, you know? Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing that. I want to ask if our audience has any questions, send them through, please. And we'll, in the 5 or 10 minutes we have left, we'll get to a few. So I was making a note to myself as I rewatched the film, and I wanted to know which came first. 40-year-old version, or find your own voice, or fund your own work, or fuck you old vultures? Which one of those was the beginning? I love that play, but
yeah, no, that
how did you find that? That's all in the
did
movie, so it's like,
yeah,
how did
but
that
didn't have that rap until the day before we shot. And I got to tell you, me and Lena, one of my producers, awesome producers who helped me find the movie and has used her platform to really celebrate the film. We always talked about getting 52 tattooed on us, because that's scene number 52, and or 152. I think it's 152, and it was the toughest scene to shoot. I'm not quite sure why. It was just like a cocktail of things that could go wrong. And my blood sugar was low. I was definitely depressed on that day. Somebody had given me some bad news on set, and I was struggling, and I still had not come up with that rhyme. I knew this was the rhyme where she's supposed to say her truth. So FYOV did not exist until that day. And I realized like I am an MC, and so I do freestyling and all of that stuff more as a meditative practice. And I was like, 40-year-old FYOV. Oh, okay. Well, we got that. And then just started building from there. You know, I was like, let me stop trying to make this about prowess. Like, I don't have to prove I'm a dope MC. I just am using the art form to get to something that's truthful. So then I was like, oh, there's an acronym in here, and what does it mean to this person, to that person, and you know. And so it was one of those beautiful things that just kind of came out of. And I'm telling you, you want to talk about doubt. You know, you're in front of camera. You're in front of camera as the actor and the director, so you can see other people's like frustrations, even though you're trying to block them out. You know, like you can see their frustrations because we were there for so long, and I kept like just everything that could go wrong went wrong. We finally got on stage. We did that. There was no audience at that particular point, and so it's kind of weird to be doing this thing and there's nobody there to receive it, you know. But we made it work. And I think it's a testament to Eric Bronco's amazing camera work. You know, like he definitely was my eye literally on the set, and Rob Wilson's editing, you know, like we really worked at this. I mean, we really did. And really grateful to have those other eyes giving the story back. So I could, now I sound like my character. You give it to me and I give it to you, and you give it to me and then I give it to you, and then you give it to me. Yeah.
Just a couple more questions.
Sure.
We're in the fall now, and I can only imagine where you were with 40-year-old version about a year ago, because it's about just a few weeks out before the lineup at Sundance was announced. So you must have been coming up on some deadlines, right? A year ago at this time.
You know, I think Sundance gave us a little bit of wiggle room, but not much, you know? Yeah. But that journey, when I look back now at what feels like 7 years ago, right? Because of this pandemic, what a charmed experience it was. Like, we got 6 audiences, right? And those audiences really helped me learn what the film was. I personally, I'm my first audience. And then my friends are the next level of audience, right? So I'm always writing to that, but those aren't the only people who are going to see the film. Like if the film is 3 hours long, then I need to be conscious of like, okay, you can't complain that you lost them because, you know, or say that you didn't know because you're here watching it. So I did kind of study their reactions to it and their laughter when they laughed, if they got something, if a beat went on too long. So that was a great learning experience for me. But I think at the time I also forgot it was a market. You know what I mean? Like I was so happy to meet people and talk to them about the film. I was like, oh, what do you mean? Oh, we got to get a meeting. Okay, damn, you know, but it was a real blessing, especially when, you know, festivals like South by Southwest was some of the first to follow and then get canceled, you know? So it was a mad dash to get it into Sundance. But I felt for my development story, my development arc, it would make sense to show the film there. So even though I'm like, oh, I don't care, you know, like whatever, it can't be about a festival. I have to make the film, please. I was so happy to get in. And then I was like a pig in slop when we got into competition. So you can imagine my shock of getting that award because one, any filmmaker worth their weight will say, like, you're not making films for an award. So that's not my priority in life, but to get it from Sundance and then to get directing, when I thought, okay, if anything, this ensemble is, whew, you know, when that didn't happen, I just continued to drink and enjoy myself at this social affair. So when Dee Reese, my good friend, gets up there and she's talking, I'm like, oh, look at Dee. She's so cute. Look at my friend. And then she's like, she's announcing the winner of the award. And she's like, and this filmmaker in the spirit of Chaplin and Orson Welles and, you know, Spike Lee. And I'm like, oh, okay. So somebody else is also in their film. I wonder who it was. She said this directing, writing, producing, rapping. When she said rapping, that's when I said, I lost it because I was not expecting to get that award. And what an affirmation that was. I think a lot of people think I made this film maybe so I can get more acting work. It was a directing job. I still had to direct it, right? And a lot of work, sweat, tears, choices, failures went into that. So to get that award, to get that kind of affirmation in a place where I've been kind of homegrown through Sundance. I've been in their creative producing lab. I was in their screenwriting lab. I was in numerous labs with them. To get that kind of affirmation from what felt like my filmmaking community was really a great way to start the year.
When it was amazing as a viewer to watch this film and to be introduced to you and this film at Sundance. Last question. I don't know if you have the distance to answer this question, but I'd love to hear your answer now, and maybe a year from now I'll ask you again. But when we can get together in person with the same group meeting virtually, we'll meet in person when we can show it on an actual screen, right? What do you feel like you've learned in any aspect of the film, in any aspect of the creativity that you've celebrated and shared now with audiences in different ways? Where do you feel like you've grown, or what do you feel like you've learned over the course of this ride so far?
I learned that, you know, no matter who pushes back or who critiques the work, at the end of the day, I have to feel good about the product. I cannot put other people, from my producers to the actors. Like if there was we had Reed Birney, he was a Tony Award winning actor and he loved the film. But when I first started working with him, I was a little intimidated because I've not worked with an actor of his stature. And, you know, here's a film that is like a critique of white gatekeepers. I wasn't sure how he was gonna, but we created that character together. Actually, he really did flesh out that character. He's like, oh, I know this guy. And so he really embraced it. But I had to really quiet all of those voices and really, at the end of the day, believe in myself. And so what other people don't know, and it just in terms of my personal, making this film was probably the most radical act of self-love I could have done. I'm someone who struggled with that, you know, over the years. And the fact that I was always willing to say, I don't know, or I have to see, or no, that's not the movie I want to make. You know, sometimes I'm saying these things and I'm like, girl, who you think you are talking? What? You know, I mean, my thing is that I think that women filmmakers in particular, women altogether, have been conditioned to always be polite. I'm not saying you should ever be mean. You should always be kind. But as a director, there isn't always a lot of room for politeness. Like the energy it takes to really take someone in and go, well, I want to say this in a way that they know that I support them. We ain't got time for that shit. You know, we're all there for the same reason, to finish this film. And so I had to let go of a lot of that. I'm Eugene, if you haven't guessed, I'm a bit of a clown. I like to tickle and make jokes. And I had to put her away for a while because the humor is often about disarming people so I can get it, you know, and I didn't have the time to do that. If you were hired to do the job, that's it. Let's move. Let's get this. So it was about not assuming an identity that was about disarming people and being fearlessly, I wouldn't say impolite, but focused. I had to be focused. And sometimes when you're focused, that means there's no time for the niceties. It's just like, I have a job to do. I understand that as a Black woman, there are a lot of people who aren't used to taking orders, or I shouldn't say take orders, but for me to be in leadership, for me to make the ultimate and final decision. And so I could feel that from some people, but that's not my problem. That's your problem, not mine.
Right.
Whatever kind of issues you got around my gender and my color, that's just shit to deal with. But can you take care of this situation with these lights? You know what I mean? And that's not on anybody in particular. I'm just using it as an example. So yeah, I do feel like coming out on the other side, I feel like more of myself in a weird way. You know, I'm standing in a way that I have always wanted to stand. It's funny how people say like, oh, you made this film and you've changed. I would hope so. I would hope so. I would hope that I am more confident in making film. You want me to be nebbish and be like, oh my God, I know, but I actually, what I wanted from the scene is do you guys mind if I can't, no, I should feel confident because ultimately it's in my hands. If it goes bad, they're not going to go, you know, I just wish that gaffer would, no, they're going to go, Radha Blank, she needs to try it again. Okay. So yeah, I feel like the biggest lesson I've learned is like, I am the holder of the story. Ultimately, there are all of these people who have been enlisted to push me up, but I'm the one holding it, you know, and I have to be, my back has to be straight. My arms have to be strong. I have to kind of guard myself, and I cannot internalize people's behaviors. I can't, I have to focus on this thing right here. You know what I mean? Does that answer the question?
It really does. This is really meaningful words, Radha.
Thank you.
Meaningful words. So much appreciated. So happy for you. So happy this film is out in the world, and people can now share it widely. I look forward to the day that we can get together and show it on a big screen at Lincoln Center.
Yes,
I'm
so looking forward to meeting you and experiencing more of your brilliance. And to all of the filmmakers out there, like, the idea was given to you for a reason. You know, if you see it maybe as a spiritual practice, then you can get out of your own head and get out of your own way and do the work of your calling, you know? Best of luck to everybody.
Thank you to our friends at Netflix. Thank you to Radha Blank for spending this time with us on the day that the film is now out in the world. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you.